with My Make Studio, and this is the birch tree cake class. So it's a very fall cake, and also, like, I love cake, I love fall, I really like trees. So, like, I was the kid that was always in the tree, always up a tree as a kid. So, like, I really like this one. But if the sticker on your box does not say Birch Tree Cake Kit, you're probably looking for another video, so go ahead and stop this one and go back to our YouTube channel and find the video that's titled the same as whatever little sticker is on your box. But if it does say Birch Tree Cake Kit, welcome. There are a couple things we've got to go over before we actually start decorating. So number one is you do want your cakes baked. And on top of them being baked, you do want them chilled or a little bit frozen. The reason I say that is because, especially if you are new to decorating cakes, decorating colder cakes is a lot easier than decorating a warm or room temperature cake. Room temperature cake, especially since we're going to be doing some smoothing out, you might get more crumbles in your cake, and just decorating warm cake in general, like, turns into a soupy goopy mess. The icing all just forms into one blobby color. We don't want that. We want to have like a pretty birch tree design. So I would recommend them being cold or a little bit frozen. It's just going to be a lot easier to do the first couple of steps the colder your cake is. If you haven't baked your cakes yet, don't worry. Totally fine. Go ahead and stop this video, but before you do, you can find directions on how to bake your cake either back on our YouTube channel. We have a video on how to use your cake mix, or you can go to our website, which is mymakestudio.com, and we do have written directions there as well. There also should have been a little card in your box that had the baking directions on it, but then if you haven't done it yet, go ahead and stop me now and go do that, and then come back and just fast forward back to where you were at like 6 minutes and 55 seconds. All right, so cake's baked. You'll need everything from your box. So the cake board, both of the baggies, and then extra materials would be a pair of scissors just to cut some things open, a butter knife of some kind because we are going to level our cakes, and then finally some kind of towel. Like, it can be a kitchen towel, a hand towel, a paper towel, just something that we can like wipe our fingers on and put our open icing bags on to kind of help keep our area a little bit more clean. And then, as always, also make sure your hands are washed super duper well before we actually get going. So I'm just going to rearrange a little bit and we're going to dive right into the birch tree. Alrighty, so we're going to level our cakes. Now, depending on where you are in the country, your cakes might not be as domed as mine, or they might be way more domed than mine. It does not mean you did anything wrong. We just ship all over the country, and depending on where you are in the country, cakes bake differently. Lots of different things affect it, like humidity, lack thereof, altitude, the weather, the temperature, all kinds of stuff. So if your cake is super flat and you don't need to cut a lot off, you didn't do anything wrong. If your cake is super domed and you need to cut a lot off, you also didn't do anything wrong. It just depends on where you are. But the goal right now is to just make these not rounded. We want these to be flat. So I'm going to take my knife, and I'm not going to cut it like this or like this. I'm going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to saw it through to just make an even swoop. Now, you might have to do this a couple of times. I've been doing this a long time, so I usually don't have to do it a couple of times. But if you've got to go and level it a few times to get it even, nothing wrong. So I'm just going to cut it. And then what you do with the tops is up to you. One of the things you could do is snack on them while you're decorating. Another thing you can do is save them to make some cake pops. Or, since we're making a birch tree, you could put these in a bowl, which is probably what I'm going to do. And then after we have our cake decorated, sprinkle the crumbles around your cake so it looks like a birch tree and some dirt. I think that's what I'm going to do with them, but those are some options. Or if you're like, no, I don't want that. Your cake, you do what you want. But this one looks good to me. It's nice and level. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one. And then I like to turn my cake when I do it, but it's just habit. You don't have to turn it like this. It's just one of those like ingrained in me things from years of doing cake. And if you have a cake leveler, you could use that too. I just know when I first started decorating, I didn't have any of the tools. So in case you don't have them, I wanted to show you how to do it with a butter knife. Sweet! So if you accidentally cut one of these like in half or you broke it a little bit, when you were leveling. It's okay. Stuff happens. I've had that happen with a wedding cake. The bottom tier, for some reason I made the bottom one last. Had somebody help me level it, and they sneezed and just cut it right in half and then tried to catch it and knocked it into the floor. Crazy things can happen. So if you broke your cake or you cut it in half, use that part as the bottom. You can also put a little bit of icing in between those cracks, push it together. You could even saran wrap it a little bit to hold it, and then stick it in the freezer for like 30 minutes. It'll help glue your cake back together, and it'll be easier if the broken piece is the one on the bottom. But either way, whatever part you cut, so for me, this one is going to go face up, so it's facing the sky. Boop. And now we're going to add some filling. So this time our filling is going to be a little bit differently than we usually do it. So I'm going to take out the chocolate icing and the white icing. All right, I'm actually just gonna move these down here for now so you can see a little better. So just because shipping, the icing's temperature changes and all that jazz, sometimes it likes to separate a little bit. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still good. It just happens. So I like to massage it just a little bit, just in case. And then I'm going to take this little piece off, and this is my white icing, by the way. And then on my towel, I'm just gonna squeeze a little bit out, just in case there is a little bit of oil that I didn't get massaged back into my icing. There we go, and it's all good to go. So I don't want to use all of the white on this. So I am going to recommend that you make some rings starting on the edge. I'm going to do about 4 rings. You want to do 3 or 4 circles and then stop. You want to use the rest of this for the sides of your cake and for the top. So I've got it like this, and then I'm going to take my chocolate icing, take off the little thing, and then take off the cap, and then I'm going to squeeze it in the center. And we also don't want to use all of our chocolate here. So I'm using about 1/3 of it, or not 1/3 of it. I'm using about 1/4 of it, but you could use half of it if you needed to, but I would try and stay for about 1/4, just a blob. And then I have some gaps, so I'm going to take my knife and lightly pet my cake just to fill in the gaps. So I'm petting my icing and just lightly kind of like brushing it around to cover in the gaps, just so that way every bite of our cake has a little bit of this filling in it. It's like you're petting a really nervous cat, like you want it to be your friend, or you've got a feather and you're like, ooh, a feather. Boop, boop, boop. Just lightly petting it. Ta-da! So now I'm going to take my other piece, and the part that I cut is going to go face first in the icing. So this is going to go face first and down. Yes! And then I can move it around a bit, and it's ready to go. So if your cake is a little hourglassy, it comes back to the fact that cakes bake differently everywhere. You can either take it off and trim a little bit more off of it to make it flat, or when we go into this next part, in those hourglassy spots, just squeeze your icing in that spot a little bit more than you usually would, just to help like bring it out to level with your cake, so the smoothing part will go much easier. But we're ready to start the next part. All right, so now I'm gonna take my white icing, and all over my cake, you do not have to have them like best friends sticking together. I will show you what I mean, but I'm gonna make lines this way. So you can leave a little bit of a gap, but we want to do that all the way along the side, and then save about this much of your white icing for the top of your cake. So I'm just going to continue adding lines. You could also randomly add like a polka dot here and there. You could do some zaggies if you want, some swoopy doops. But you just want to do basically this all the way around the sides and don't worry about your top yet. Yes! So now I'm going to take this, and this is an icing scraper, or an icing comb, depending on what you want to call it. But we're going to use the flat side of this. So I'm going to put it against my cake and then turn my hand a little bit like a creaky window. And then with this hand, I'm going to move my board. You can either go away from yourself or towards yourself, whatever feels more comfortable, but kind of like I'm a DJ in training. If you have a Lazy Susan and want to use that instead, feel free. Again, this just comes back to, in case you don't have the tools, I want to show you how to do it without. But if you have a Lazy Susan, feel free to bust that out so you can turn it while you smooth this next part. And since we're making a tree, it does not have to be, oh my gosh, super smooth and pristine. Like, if it's a little rough in some places, I think it'll help it look more natural. And we will do at least one more smoothing after this part because we're going to add our bark, like the darker parts of our bark here in a little bit. But we want to give this one smooth to start. So, creaky window. And then I'm applying a little bit of pressure to my cake. And I'm just going to go around a couple times. Yes. I actually like the crumbles in this one because I think it helps it look more realistic. Like with all the cake colors. I feel like with all of them it works. So to me this already looks awesome. I like this. If you have a hole, like sometimes your icing likes to leave a hole when you smooth, you can take your knife, scrape this off, put this in the hole and give it another swoop, or you can put another blob of icing there, but I'm gonna go ahead and start adding the bark lines. So inside that little bag of fun, I'm gonna take out the white ring and the tip that is a circle. If you look on the side of it, it has a number 4. And I'm gonna take my chocolate, unscrew the top, put the number 4 on, and then screw this part back on over it. This is what sticks it onto the icing tube. It doesn't need to be on there so tight you can't take it off, just tight enough that if you do this, it doesn't go flying across the room. And then I'm only gonna add a few, but similar to what we just did with our white, is I'm going to make some random polka dots and lines and zigzags, but I'm gonna have them more spaced out. The more spaced out they are, the more of like a little accent to your cake they are. The more you add, the more this is going to become like a brown, like more of a brown tree bark than a birch tree bark. I hope that made sense. So it's up to you how many lines you want to put on, but I like to start with a little bit, smooth it, and then I can decide, okay, I want a little bit more there. It's easier to add a little bit more at a time than to add all of it and be like, I don't like this, and try and go back. So if you're not sure yet, just add a couple and then see how you feel. So I'm going to add some lines. You can also use this in spots that you feel like, ooh, I don't want to see as much of my cake there. Cover it up with some chocolate lines. So I like to go about like that all the way around the cake to start, and then if I want to add any more, then I go back and add some more. But I'm going to go all the way around first, show you what it's going to look like when we give it one more smooth, and then go from there. And I'm not using all of my chocolate icing for this. I'm only using a little bit. I want to save some for the top, and then if you're wanting to put a carving into your cake, which is usually one of the last things I do, is I like to put a little heart and a tree carving on there. You'll want to save like probably like that much icing for that, just in case if you want to do that. It's just something to keep in mind. All right, so I'm actually going to wipe off the white that's on here. Go back to my cake and give it a light swoop. Yes. See, I already like this. I'm gonna give it one more go around because I didn't quite get into this one spot. And I'm actually gonna call that. I like this. I feel like it could have a little bit more white on top up here, so I'm gonna add just a little bit more. Swoop it one more time. Still saving enough white for the top of my cake. And then we'll go over how to do the top. Another reason that we don't do the top while we're doing this part is sometimes if you're not used to smoothing cakes out, it's a little easier to put your hand on top. So if you need to put your hand on top and hold it, that way you're not wasting your icing by getting it all over your hand. We'll just do the side, get our sides all done, and then we'll worry about the top. Now, if you want your lines to be a bit more defined, like I want a little bit more definition going on in my cake, I'm just gonna go and add a couple more lines and not smooth it out. It'll also help give like that barky texture vibe. You can also use this part of your spatula, cake scraper, icing comb, after you've smoothed it out to create some textured lines in there, which I actually think for this one, I'm gonna do that all the way around this time. All right, so for the top, I'm going to take the white icing and I'm gonna create rings again. I'm gonna start on the edge. And then I'm gonna do 2 rings of chocolate. And I'm gonna leave my tip on for this. You could do 3 if you wanted, but I'm gonna do 2. And then I'm gonna go back to my white and do another one. Now, if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm running low on my icing, you don't really have to worry about this part. I would just put some white and brown down, kind of do the feather pet thing like we did for the inside, and then just add chocolate circles on top of that. Just everybody squeezes a different amount. So if you're running low on your icing, don't worry about it. Instead, just squeeze your whatever you have left of your white on top, maybe a couple blobs of chocolate. See how much you can get on the top, and then just go back and add some chocolate circles into what you spread, because this actually is going to get mixed together here in a little bit when we spread it. But if you like how it looks without spreading it, you also don't have to spread it if you don't want to. So I'm doing 1 ring of white, 2 ring of chocolate, 1 ring of white, 2 ring of chocolate. We'll only need a little bit of chocolate for if you want to do a carving and for if you want to use them for your flower centers. So I've got about that much left in here right now. That's fine. I actually think that's going to be more than I need, but I'd rather have a little bit more than I need than not enough, because then I can go back and add other stuff. Alrighty. So now you can either use your spatula to lightly smooth. I'm going to use the flat part of the scraper, but I'm holding it this way now. And lightly, very lightly scrape into my icing, because I want to keep this ring pattern going. So I'm actually using the edge to scrape more so than I am the flat part. I'm just kind of filling it in. See how it gets kind of messed up? Which you can leave it like, oh, that looks so good. This looks barky, so you can leave it like this, but I am going to go ahead and go back to this and using that turntable thing again, use this to define my lines a little bit more, and then I'm going to use the edge for the center pieces. Like that? Yes! And you can stop here if you want. If you're like, no, this is gorgeous. Just put some green icing on your board, smooth it around, and you're done. But I am going to show you how to add some vines, leaves, flowers, carving, and then some options for some fondant roses if you would like those as well. But I'm already very happy with this. Like, it looks like a tree. So I'm going to go to my icing bags again. Where did I put those? Oh, yes, here they are. And I'm going to start with my green icing, and I am going to put that onto, I'm going to put the round tip, so the one that's on my chocolate, the number 4, I'm going to put that on my green. So you can go rinse it out if you want, Or you can just put it on your green and squeeze for a little bit and it'll come out. It's totally your choice. I'm going to just come to my paper towel, squeeze it until I don't see any more chocolate. Yes, and then I'm ready to go. So for vines, this is going to be the front of my cake. Actually, decide what's going to be the front of your cake first. So actually, this part's a little bit lighter, so my carving will show up more here. So this is going to be the front. So it is up to you where you want your vines. You can have your vines on the side. You can have your vines coming off the board. I like to have my vines on this side, kind of leaking into the center of my cake, but it is all personal preference. Whatever you feel like is going to look best. You can have vines just coming up the bottoms and like there are flowers growing around the tree instead of on your tree. Just, it's totally up to you, but either way it's achieved the same. This tip is really good for drawing, so I'm just going to draw a couple of like squiggles and like swirlies for my vines. So I usually start on the top, do a big swirl, and go from there. And I don't want to completely cover the top because I like this ring effect. I don't want to get rid of that, so that's why I only go halfway on. And then I'm going to bring my flowers down this side. If you have a spot of your cake that just is like, no, ew, didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes cake and icing have minds of their own and don't want to do what you want them to do. But one of the best parts I feel like about cake decorating is knowing how to work with that. So if you have a spot of your cake that the icing just doesn't look good or it didn't smooth out as well or it's a little crumbly, use that spot for a cluster of flowers. So go ahead and map out your vines, and then you can put flowers around that and completely cover that spot and nobody will know it's there. That's basically what my vines are right now. They're just a guideline for me because I like my flowers on the vines, so I know where to put them. So I'm going to turn the cake towards me so I can see it a little bit better and finish drawing my lines. Ta-da! So this is going to be the front where I put my carving, and then I decided I did want some on the bottom today. So I've got some right here, and then I've got some vines here. So next is going to be our flowers. So for our flowers, I'm going to take the little ring off of this and leave my tip and my green here. And then I'm going to take out the remaining tip from the bag, which is the one that looks like an alligator mouth. It has a 352 on the side. This is a leaf tip, but it also looks like a V, just depending on how you're holding it, what your perspective would be. And then I'm going to put this on my yellow icing. So this is actually a leaf tip, but we are going to use it for flower petals first. So I'm going to put it on, give it a little squeeze over here. And then I'm actually going to come close to you for this one because it's a little easier to see. I'm in your space, but virtually. So you want to hold it like it's an alligator mouth. And then I'm not going to move my squeezing hand until the end. So I'm alligator mouth. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, stop squeezing and pull back. 1, 2, 3, stop and pull. So to create a flower, you would just do that in a circle. If it's looking like this one right here, it means you were holding it this way instead of like an alligator mouth. So make sure you've got your alligator mouth going. You can always try it out on your towel or even your icing comb first before you start going on your cake if you like. But I'm just going to pick some spots. So I'm holding it sideways, and you can do 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4. The longer you squeeze, the bigger your petal will be. And the reason you stop squeezing before you pull back is it gets you a much cleaner point. If you keep squeezing while you pull back, it will still have a point, but it'll be much more like hangy plant vibe and like really long, thin flower petal vibe instead of like full blooming flower petal vibe. So I'm going to do, well, looks like I'm going to do 1, 2, and then I'm just going in a circle. So you'll want to get like 4 or 5. Let's see if I can hold this without it falling. But ta-da! So I'm just going to put those flowers randomly on spots of my vines and then come back. Ta-da! So you can add more flowers if you want. It's just however many you want to add on there. But I'm happy with this. And now I'm actually going to go back to that round tip, put it on my chocolate. So for this one, if you're running low on your chocolate, I do recommend rinsing it out. Just if you're getting a little bit low, that way you don't waste any icing. But I've still got a little bit more than I need, so it should be fine to squeeze it out. Perfect. So I'm just going to put a little dot inside all of my little flower clusters. A cluster for, if any of you got that reference, heck yeah. But just so it gives it a little more like, oh my gosh, it's a cute flower. Like, it's the little things that I feel like help bring everything together. It's all the tiny details. And adding the little chocolate circles into your flower clusters just makes them pop in a certain way that I'm a big fan of. Yes! So I'm going to set this down. And then that leaf tip, the one we use for yellow flowers, I'm going to put it on my green now and just add a couple of green leaves because I feel like it. So it's the same method. It's still holding it like an alligator mouth and squeezing 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3. But you can hold it straight up and down now. So I will show you what that looks like, but it's the exact same thing. You don't want to move your hand till the end. So alligator, turn it up and down, and then I'm not going to move till the end. It's the same motion, just a different angle. So 1, 2, 3, stop and lift. Just if you want your leaves going in different directions. I am a fan of like really sporadic leaves. I really like wild looking nature versus like super clean and trim looking nature. So I like the leaves going in different directions and not being uniform. But if that's not your style, it's your cake. Whatever's gonna make you happy. If you like uniform leaves more, then do uniform leaves. Or if you're like, no, I don't want to put any leaves on here, you don't have to. Totally don't have to. But I like to just add a couple coming off of my flowers. Like so. I like to add just a couple like that here and there, and maybe 1 or 2 on the vine. So I'm just gonna add a few leaves and stop. All right, so I am gonna go ahead and add my carving now. And then we have something we haven't even talked about yet. So this is red fondant. After I add the carving, I'm gonna show you a couple different ways that you can make some roses. I'll probably show you two different ways, but you can either make a bunch of little roses to put on your cake. I'm just going to make 2 big ones and put them right here. But you don't have to do 2 big ones. You can do tiny ones and make a whole border around your cake of little roses. Or you can just make like 2 or 3 and put them on the top. You have options, but this will be the last thing we talk about. I am going to go ahead and add my carving. So for my carving, I'm going to put the number 4 tip on my brown. And then if you are worried about keeping things even or your carving looking kind of weird, you can take your butter knife, the end of your scissors, or a toothpick and lightly trace into your cake what you want the carving to be first, and then use that as a stencil and go back over it with your icing. So I actually have to look at mine, but I'm going to do a heart with an arrow. So I've got to look at it here so it's not too cattywampus. And I also think if your carving doesn't look super symmetrical, I don't know if you've ever tried to carve into a tree, but it's pretty hard to get it super symmetrical. So if it's not perfect looking, it's not gonna make this look wrong. Like, it'll still work. So I just did a little heart, and then I'm going to put a little line here, have a little arrow, and then a little line here, and some little lines for the end of my arrow. I'm actually going to take it a little bit further into my carving. And then I'm going to put some initials. I'm going to do CT because that's me and my person's initials. I'll do a plus. You could write, you don't have to do initials, but you could write, I love you, or yay, cake. You can put whatever you want in there. It also doesn't have to be a heart. You could carve, do a fake carving, whatever you want. It's one of the best parts of the icing tip. This tip in particular, the round one, it's really good for drawing. But, yeah, I want my tea a little longer. Yes! It's cute. So I'm going to wipe my hands off a bit. If you have any chocolate icing on your hands before this next part, you'll want to wash your hands off so it doesn't stain the fondant. However, water makes fondant very sticky. So after you've washed your hands, you want to make sure they are super duper dry before you start working with this. You can work with it with slightly wet hands, but it's going to stick to you and it's going to feel really weird. It's not going to hurt it. If you keep mushing it up, it should be fine as long as your hands aren't like soaking wet. But I would recommend getting your hands as dry as possible first, just because it's a weird feeling. So for this, I'm just going to cut the top off. And then I personally then like to take my scissors and cut it like this. You don't have to. You can get it open however you want. But that's how I do it. And then I only want 2 roses. So I'm probably going to use about half of this. But I'm going to show you how two different ways you can make them. And then you can decide what size you want and how many you want. So way number 1 is I'll just use both halves. I rip off chunks of fondant. Doesn't really matter if they're the same size. And then I'm going to roll all of these into a ball. And then I'm not going to mosquito squash them, but I am going to boop them like so. So they're not super duper squashed, they're just not rounded anymore. I'm going to do that to all of these right here. So now I have them all this way. I am going to lay it on top. And then I give them a little bit, I'm using my finger to kind of drag them into the other one to help them get to stick. So you can also just get a little bit of water to act as a glue too, so you don't have to do this mushing part if you'd like. You just want a little bit of water, not a lot. But I'm making a little row like this, and I'm going to keep doing that until I've used all of them. I can show you another way to make rows. We'll go over another way too. But now that I have them all like this, I am just going to pick an end, keep them pretty close together, and I'm going to wrap them up. So I'm just rolling them on top of themselves. Like so. And then I like to pinch the bottom to definitely make sure they're all stuck together. Especially since I didn't use water for this, but you can use water. I didn't feel like going to the sink, to be honest. And then I rip some off, and you have a rose. So I'm gonna put that one right here. Yes. Another way you could do it is make one ball, and then do what we just did, where we rip off some chunks. Make them all a ball, but this time instead of booping all of them, leave one rounded. And you will want some water for this one, so mine's not going to stick as well. But I'm going to take the one that's rounded, put a little thing on, put another one on, put another one on, put another one on. I'm just going around my ball. And it'll make you a little tiny rose too. Just, you'll want to have, like, the more petals you have, the more intricate it'll be. But this is an option. So I'll put that one up here. That's cute! Yes! I didn't do that last time. And then another way you can do it is, especially, so I'm going to mush my fondant up now. Just because fondant gets stiff after it's been unwrapped. Like, the air just makes it dry. So you just need to mush it up with your hands just a little bit to soften it back up. And then, excuse me, cake, I'm going to roll a tube snake. And then you can either take one finger or both your fingers, but I'm going to boop, 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 boop. I'm going to squish it down to where it kind of looks like an old piece of bubble gum. I know that's not very appealing, but that's the easiest comparison my mind can make to what this should look like. This old chewed up piece of gum. And then just like with the first one, pick an end and you're going to wrap it on itself. You can, if you go at an angle, your petals will stick up taller. So just try and keep in mind, I try to keep it level or slightly angled so they don't get too much taller. We'll make like a ribbon rose this way, and then you can pinch the end or rip some off. And I'm gonna stick it right there. And then that is the birch tree cake. And then if you saved your chocolate cake, you can crumble it up. It'll stick better if you put a little bit of icing on the sides. I have a little bit of green left, so I could have done that to get this to stick, but I wanted to show you that you can rip up the cake that you cut off earlier and what it would look like as part of your design. Just kind of give you a general idea of if you go all the way around like that. I think it's cute. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and rearrange some things just a little bit and then tell you guys the spiel. But that's it, you guys. This is the birch tree cake. Isn't it cute? I'm so excited to see what you guys did with your vines and your flowers. And if you did a bunch of roses or no roses or a little border of roses, or if you used your cake, like, I love seeing how creative you guys get with this and how you put your own spins on them. So if you would ever like to share your beautiful creations with us, you can always tag us with hashtag MyMakeStudioKits, or you can send us your photos on our Facebook, which is MyMakeStudio, or our Instagram, which is @MyMakeStudio. Those are also just good places to follow in general because we're constantly updating new and upcoming things. And also, if you didn't know, we're Denver based. So if you just kind of want to see what's going on in Denver, like what kind of in-person events and stuff that we're having, those are good places to follow. And then if you need more cake, we also do cupcakes. You could check out our website, which is mymakestudio.com. We've got cupcake kits, cake kits, we have a pastry kit. During the holiday season, so like December and October, we have gingerbread houses. We've got all kinds of stuff. In the fall, we've got a pumpkin lovers kit. So those are just good places to like see what's going on in general. But thank you so much for coming today. I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoy eating your tree cake, your beautiful birch tree. Thank you so much for coming. And as always, stay creative.